am incredibly disappointed in the disinformation that has been being disseminated. The disinformation by associations that really should know better. Now, either, I don't know if you've read the bill. I hope you have. The information is contained therein, but either there's confusion as to what the bill contains, and I guess I can give the association some leeway in the fact that maybe they didn't understand that and that it wasn't anything else. But it is troubling to me. And so we've changed a little bit of this, and my teammate over there, the good gentleman from District 31, will then be helping me with this as we've been working on this together. Part of this fix is how things used to be. The overregulation that cities have established with their rules on daycares has shut many of them down. It's made it impossible for the daycares to function. This is not a new thing. I've been working on this since 2009. I'm very well aware of this, and actually the reason I declared a Rule 80 is because I have to abide by these same rules and regulations with the preschool that we run at Apple Athletic Club, where my place of employment, something I started and been running for almost 20 years now. And I've been, I've seen the decline in enrollment as the numbering system is increased, and that can affect your bottom line. And so when some of those daycare providers come to me, and literally at one point a city had just systematically changed to a lower number, which absolutely affected their bottom line, because when we're talking about some of these cities, some of the daycares, one child, when you're watching 12 children and you have to go to 11, that can be a make or break deal. I've also noticed in our area that those who went to the county. They moved their business to the county. But if you're running something out of your home, you can't just move to the county. Literally, again, constituents had to stop running their daycare. If you notice, there is a direct correlation, if you look back through the years, on the regulations, the decrease in daycares, and the increase in costs. Costs have systematically risen and skyrocketed because of the lack of childcare. Now, many of us grew up in a time where, hey, our neighbors watched a couple kids and made it possible. So, as a mom, you say, hey, can you watch these kids? And that's exactly what they did. And a lot of the answer is right in that, going back to that which we had, just watching kids. Can you imagine, I think right now, a lot of people are thinking we need the great big box daycares. No, we don't. Something as simple in this area. Imagine if you had 200 families, just 200, decide to watch 5 to 6 kids. That'd be 1,200 kids. And how much of a workforce would that be able to create? Just deciding, hey, we've got a few families that are going to watch a few kids. Now, President Trump has even addressed this issue. And I'm going to say this now in case there's something in closing. I just want to say Vice President J.D. Vance has had a lot to say specifically on the deregulation. And that's what we do in Idaho, right? We do sensible deregulation. And I'm going to show where this is more than sensible. Now, let's talk about the ratios, because that is probably the biggest issue that has been hit upon. We are eliminating ratios. That's not true, okay? Under this legislation, a daycare would, and we're talking the larger daycares. So there are 3 sizes of daycares. We have a family daycare home, and we have a group daycare facility, and a daycare center. Now, the daycare centers would be the largest, and they would have more than 13. Those daycares are the ones everybody still has to mention. I put down what the ratios are, but those big daycare centers, they're the ones fighting this the most. We don't want to change them. Put whatever ratio you want. If you want to have a 1-to-2 ratio, you can do that. You can do that. We are not, but you have to have a plan. You have to have a business model. It has to be stated, and parents have to have access to that. If your business grows and you want to change that, then you have to, just like if you're going to change, say, your cost per hour rate or your daily rate, then you have a plan. Maybe that's 3 months from now. You outline it, you let people know, and you can do that. But here's the thing, guys, and I want you to hear this because, again, it's a misleading, misdirection. A family daycare home can only be licensed as a family daycare home if they have 6 or fewer children. That's in the law. Call that a ratio. That's a cap. So 6 or fewer, that's a law, 6 or fewer children. If you want to have a group daycare facility, that's 7 to 12 children. That's in the law. That's a cap. Okay? Those are already there. We're not eliminating that. As a matter of fact, you know, Mr. Speaker, I almost would like to request unanimous consent to read from the health and welfare rules, but I think it would be boring. Because as I get into the health and welfare rules and all of the rules and regulations, I see fire safety standards. I see facility capacity and determining occupational load standards. I see fire extinguisher standards. In part of this, I see fire safety and evacuation plans that are necessary. I see health standards still in these regulations. Oh my goodness, I see safe sleeping regulations still in all these rules. What else do I see? I see so many things. What happens with the suspension of the revocation of a license? They're all still here in the rules. I will spare you. I won't read them all. That would be so boring. I would object to that if I were you. But we aren't dropping the regulations. We aren't dropping the regulations. You still need a background check. You still need that. Okay? You're still going to need the license depending on what kind of facility you want. And then the cities are still going to be able to inspect, you know, they've got their fire code, and depending on how big you know, if you've got the big daycare, you're going to have your building codes. You know, we still have those things. So I just want to make sure that that misinformation is being addressed, and that you don't get caught up in this frenzy that I think is misappropriated. Daycares should actually also be acknowledged for the good things that they do. How long have they been there? What sort of, what am I trying to say? How long have they been there, and what sort of background have they had as far as how many kids have been hurt or leave, and you know, how long they keep staff members, you know, turnover. Those are some really good indications as to what kind of regulation you have. What's being suggested is, oh, now we could have a 1-to-18 ratio of kids. Yeah, who are you going to get to hire that's going to watch 1-to-18 kids? You know, 10 crying babies. We even had somebody come and testify in the committee that she was hired, and I think she said she was over 6 babies and she hated it. I'm thinking, yeah, exactly. And so you quit. Nobody's going to work in those conditions. At some point, we have to trust the parent. One of the main things I heard in the testimony, parents were demonized. They were demonized. And to me, this is another example, too, of a parental rights bill, because we trust our parents. And what we were hearing is that really it's government that has to dictate everything you do, because government knows best. We're talking about our kids, and we're talking about, you know, who's going to love them, who's going to watch them and protect them. And I think, you know, one of the other things I'm hearing from some of these other larger, facilities is they also want it all to be about education. Boy, you get those 1-year-olds, and we have to start educating them. And you know what? Kids need to play. They need to have organized play. Now, another thing I'll just point out, and then I need to get this turned over to my teammate over there, but I do want to point this out because it's kind of important to me. If on the bill, on the legislation, if you go to page 4 and 5, you will see that we removed the old point system. And I'll tell you, I was ended up with our preschool. We ended up in trouble because it gets very confusing. Even the cities will get confused because of there's overlap between the state and the cities. And I got a text one time when I was sitting there, or a call rather, when I was in Jude and Rules a few years back. And it was my boss, and I'm like, that's so odd for him to be calling me. And I didn't get it. We were in the middle of, you know, testimony, hearing. And then I got a text, and it says, call me ASAP. They're shutting our preschool down. I'm like, oh my gosh, what just happened? I get out there, I call. It turns out that supposedly our count was off. I got a hold of the necessary person. We went through the count. I knew the information better than they did. Turns out our count was not off. It's very confusing, and our preschool was fine. But that was a little disconcerting, to get. So if you go to page 4 and 5, and you see that we removed the old point system on page 5, beginning line 9, section 4. This is language we add that was not in the old language. So I can read that to you. It's in the bill. Daycare facilities shall establish and maintain a child-to-staff ratio. Here's a ratio mention. A child-to-staff ratio appropriate to ensure the health, safety, and welfare of all children in attendance. Now, isn't that ultimately what we want? Because we could have a ratio of kids that were all troubled kids or incredibly active kids, or kids that were very difficult to handle, and that wouldn't meet this standard. This is a higher standard. And I'll just quickly say again that they shall establish and maintain a child-to-staff ratio appropriate to ensure the health, safety, and welfare of all children in attendance. You know where we're getting that from? It's called active supervision. It comes from Head Start. Active supervision, that's what we want in our daycare facilities. We don't want, some imaginary number that doesn't actively supervise our kids. So this is part of the law that we're putting in there, and I hope that gives you some ease in knowing that, we're not doing what we're being accused of doing. It's all there. We are not dropping regulations. Health and welfare, where appropriate, has been consulted to make sure that all safety and all regulations that they can handle, they absolutely can handle. They're set up for it. Remember, out of the 199 cities that we have, only the Department of Health and Welfare oversees 190 of them. They already do this. It's already in place. This is not going to be difficult. We had to make sure that they'd be able to handle 9 more cities. They assured us they could. So with that, and remember, I did mention J.D. Vance in case I have to go back to him and close. With that, if I could turn the rest of this over to my teammate from the District 31.
After that, there's more to learn. In 15 minutes, I checked out 10. Go ahead, good gentleman.
Thanks. She's tough to follow. I just want you to know we're on a co-ed team. Mr. Speaker, I'm happy to be here today. I just wanted a little nostalgia for you guys that have been here for a long time. Who does this remind you of, Mr. Speaker? Mr. Neil Anderson, if you don't know. He was my hero back then. Mr. Neil Anderson would have loved this bill. He was all about a champion for business. He was about deregulation. He was about fair competition. He was about lowering barriers for economic growth. He was business-minded, and I miss him, and this bill reminded me of him. He's home playing with his grandkids. Millions of Americans right now are joining Trump and increasing the workforce. And there is a movement right now that I think is really a neat movement for economic development. Idaho has always been Doge. We have always been deregulating. We have always been on the frontier of that. Thanks to the speaker, the gentleman on the second floor, we've eliminated hundreds and hundreds of pages of regulations. This bill is deregulating the child care industry, and they continue to do that. I was raised in a home where my mom and dad both worked. My mom was a nurse, my dad was a farmhand, and I spent a lot of time at the babysitter. And her name was Sybil, and she lived in Louisville, Idaho, and she pretty much raised me from the time I came home from school until my dad picked me up at 7 o'clock at night because he was a farmhand. My mom worked nights, and she was wonderful. And I'll always appreciate what she did there. The best day of her life was when my mom said, Rod doesn't need to go back to the babysitter. I was not an easy kid to babysit, I'm sure. The thing, though, is that she could stay at home She loved her kids. She stayed at home with her kids, and she could babysit some kids and make a few extra dollars and help their family financially through hard times. They weren't a rich family, but they just made it. They just got through. This bill, what it does is it opens up the market, a free marketplace that allows moms to babysit more kids, or even some kids. Currently, health and welfare, if you have less than 4 kids, you don't have a license on that. And you could babysit those kids. You're not visited with less than 4 kids, unless you live in Boise. Then you get 4 visits if you have 1 kid. Plus you get the 2 visits from health and welfare if you have over 4 kids. It's over-regulation. It's over the top, actually. I think the Idaho way is to deregulate. We do have a child care crisis. The number of kids that are eligible for have dropped in Idaho somewhat. But we've also had a 10% decrease in providers, but we put 2.5 times more money into the system. That should tell you, the members of this good body, that money is not solving the healthcare crisis. Money does not solve this crisis, but deregulation will solve this crisis. Utah just passed a bill last year's Health Bill HB 153, or however they name it, but they now allow up to 8 kids in a home, no visits, no regulation. They let the parents decide what the ratio is, and they let the parents decide if that person will babysit up to 8 kids. They did that because they recognized that it would increase the workforce, and they're having the same problem that we talk about in JFAC all the time. We can't find enough workers. It's stymieing the growth in Utah. It's stymieing the growth in Idaho. Child care is a big burden for those that want to work. Roughly 40% of the children in Idaho lack consistent, ongoing child care. That's a huge number. Permission, Mr. Speaker, to read a few stats.
Unanimous consent has been requested to read. Is there objection? Gentleman may read.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My photogenic memory is lacking a little bit. It's estimated that $478 million are lost annually in Idaho in the economy by the U.S. Chamber of Commerce and Foundation. Let me just read a few more of these stats. They estimate that Idaho loses $65 million annually in tax revenue due to child care issues. Absences and employee turnover costs Idaho $414 million a year. More than 90% of the parents rely on family members for at least some child care. About 1/2 of parents reported missing work due to child care. 23% of parents postponed school or training due to the lack of child care. 31% of parents reported child care issues significantly impacted their employment over the last 12 months. Of an enrolled group, 34% reported child care issues significantly impacted their classes or training programs over the last 12 months. Those are people in college. 48% of Idaho parents missed an average of 12 days of work because of lack of child care. Given this, we calculate the direct employer cost due to absenteeism as $166 million to Idaho's economy. In 2020, the state, according to the Idaho Statesman, there was a 30% gap in the number of children who needed care but could not find it. I think that overregulation is a great way to jumpstart our economy, or overregulation is prohibiting us from jumpstarting our economy, increasing our workforce, and this is a good way to start it. I like what Ronald Reagan said a long time ago. I'm almost done, Mr. Speaker. He said, I think you know that I've always felt the 9 most terrifying words in the English language are, I'm from the government and I'm here to help. Let's not overregulate child care. Let's give the parents a chance to make their own decision. Vote green on House Bill 243.
Heard the motion. For the debate on the motion. Good lady from 17.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would the good lady from 33 yield to a question?
Good lady yield to a short question.
I like that stipulation, absolutely.
Good lady yields.
Thank you, good lady. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question, I understand that a facility is able to choose their ratio, advertise it to parents. My question is, what would the process be for changing that ratio, especially since most parents will have entered into a contract for care under one understanding of the ratio?
Lady 33.
Mr. Speaker, good lady.
Good lady from 17, please stand. Good lady from 33.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, good lady. It essentially is the same process that all businesses use. So you do have to have a business model. You do have to have it posted. And if you're going to make changes, you need to be able to indicate how you're going to do that. And then you start letting your clientele know you're not going to be able to do it, the next day, for example. Just as I said in the opening, if you're planning to change your rates, you need to give ample time. And so it's kind of, I guess the best way to say is best business practices.
Lady from 17, further debate on the motion. Lady from 18.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, to debate against the bill.
Lady has the floor.
Thank you. Just at the outset, I understand the craving to deregulate in Idaho, but I really feel that this area is one that is uniquely inappropriate for over deregulation. We talk about vulnerable populations. I don't know what population is more vulnerable than 1-year-olds. They are very easily injured. They are nonverbal. They can't tell us. They can't identify abuse or problems or neglect. They can't express it to people. We are putting incredible trust. Parents are not coming into these places every 5 minutes. They're dropping their kid off at 8 a.m. and maybe coming back at 5 p.m. And they are putting a tremendous amount of faith. They are putting their whole world in the hands of this facility during that time. And so I think if there is any place in the world that it's appropriate to have robust regulations, it's for daycare. And I don't believe that what we're looking at today is sensible deregulation. There was some talk on ratios. This is the total elimination of ratios. Saying that they can still optionally decide to have ratios doesn't mean that there are ratios. There's no requirement. And one thing we heard in committee, we would be the only jurisdiction in the civilized world to not have a required ratio for staff to children. No other state does this. No other developed country does this. We are plunging into some pretty scary territory here. And I tend to suspect that, all those other countries and all those other states aren't just silly paper pushers. I think they set up these ratios for a reason. I'm guessing that something really bad happened, and that's why they put in ratios, to make sure that there is adequate supervision in this incredibly delicate population who can be so easily injured, who can choke on something in the blink of an eye if they're not being watched, and if there aren't adequate people to follow. And but this bill does two things. It eliminates most of the state requirements around child safety in these facilities, but it also has a preemption piece, and it wipes out everything that cities might choose to do to protect these facilities. Some of the things that I looked into that are being eliminated at the local level, they are eliminating all local regulations and not replacing them with state regulations around training. They say in the bill, training can be anything you want it to be. You can be trained by just hanging out with kids or watching a television program. It can be anything. There are no real requirements. Currently, localities do have requirements on training. They have requirements on CPR and other certifications. They can put requirements around inspections. They can require safe transportation, that if they're going to take your child on a field trip, they have to be put in a car seat or a seatbelt. All of that's wiped out in this bill. It's not replaced by anything at the state level. And in fact, cities are banned from putting in any requirement that they have to transport your child in a car seat. They eliminate all the local regulations that you have to be within sight or sound of a child. There are some really serious common sense local things that are getting wiped out in this bill and not replaced in any way, shape, or form. And I understand, I'm very sympathetic on the need for more daycare supply and more childcare supply. This is not the way. We should not be looking to solve our supply problem by cutting safety, particularly in this area and for this population. I joked in committee, if you don't have enough brain surgeons, the answer is not to let plumbers do it. And that's kind of where we're heading with this bill. Because you're not solving the problem, you're creating a new problem and a much bigger problem by eradicating the safety protections around the child care facilities that we do have. And I'm a parent, and this really speaks to me. Thankfully, my kids are old enough now that I won't be subjecting them to what I view as this dangerous possible future regimen. But as a working parent, when my kids were little, I was working 60 hours a week. I had to help support 4 kids. I was supporting my mom. I was paying off college debt. I was paying off law school debt. I was trying to pay a mortgage. I was heavily reliant. When I dropped my kids off in the morning, I was taking a huge leap of faith that they were going to be safe. I did not have 100 hours to investigate and dig in and investigate all what the rules and regulations should be and were they complying. I was believing that, if these people are licensed and if my city has given them a license, my kid's going to be safe there. They're going to be doing the things that I looked at the place, of course, but I did have to place some faith and some trust that people who were really expert in this area had looked at it and knew that this was a safe place for me to be leaving my kids. And I'm not the only parent who feels that way. All of your inboxes are flooded, I know mine is, from hundreds of parents. This is not a pro-parent bill. Parents are freaking out about this bill. They are very worried about a world where they are going to be leaving their kids in a place that they can no longer know is safe and that is not subject to sensible and important regulations. There are so many other tools that we can look at to solve the supply problem that leave safety intact. And our local governments are using many of those tools, things like tax incentives and shortening licensing processing times and waiving license application fees, offering subsidized training, real training that really teaches them what they need to know for people who want to work in this area. There is no reason to gut local control on this area. Voters are perfectly capable of electing local officials that align with their needs, and different communities might have different needs. Maybe some communities aren't so concerned. Some communities are very concerned about having these regulations. Let those local people decide. Let them elect the people that will implement the policies that they want. This is a really unnecessary and dangerous infringement of local control. And if you have ever said that you support local control, this is the time to put your money where your mouth is.
Further debate on the bill. Gentleman from 7.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To debate in favor.
Gentleman has the floor.
I'd like to just reiterate some of the misconceptions that are being spoken to that we currently just heard. Idaho Department of Health and Welfare has a ratio standard, period. At the end of day, the ratio standard exists. It is not going anywhere. It is written in their manual that they must maintain a ratio based off of age and the person doing the watching of the children. This is a bill to help promote small business in the state of Idaho, period. We are supposed to be a small business state that supports small businesses like myself. Parents are the ultimate end-all be-all of safety of their children. When they walk into a facility and they see something they don't like, I have 2 kids. I went through daycare. I paid $14,000 a year for daycare. If you walk into a building, in-home daycare, and it's not up to your standards, you see something you don't like, the first thing your wife is going to do is say nope, and you're going to go find another one. This industry will regulate itself, period. This is common sense. There is a huge crisis right now. People cannot afford daycare. I could barely afford it with my 2 kids. This will help people get back to work, save money. It will help start small businesses with single parents or a stay-at-home wife with their children can now bring in some extra income to help put food on their table, to help with the inflationary costs of groceries throughout the state and throughout the country. This is a good bill. I urge your guys' green light on this. Please pass this bill. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Further debate on the motion. Gentleman 33.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just favor the bill.
Gentleman has the floor.
So just a couple of years ago, those of you who remember, there was hundreds of emails flooding our inboxes saying they needed $30 million more to open up more daycare options. And here we are having a great debate about ways to do that. This is common sense legislation, a way to easily offset that, and we're not having to spend $30 million to make it happen. I'm sure you JFACers will remember those hundreds of emails coming from the same entities that are trying to right now fight this. This is common sense. And these people that I call back in my own home district and explain about the bill, then what same parents that were sending the emails, those people, once you talk to them about what's really going on here, they're at ease. And they're like, thanks for calling me. Thanks for taking that time and explain what's really going on here. And it's going to benefit our local communities. And I have a lot more faith in our families than what we've been seeing exhibited in these debates. So please give it your green light.
Further debate on the motion. The lady from 33 care to close. Gentleman 35.
Mr. Speaker, to quickly and lightly debate the bill, if I may.
Gentleman has the floor.
I came to this conversation excited for the good sponsors bringing this conversation to our attention. When I was on the Ammon City Council myself, we made what I consider to be the right decision, which is that we eliminated daycare regulation in the city and matched it up with the state standard. So I think I'd like to see all of our cities get there, but I think we as state government need to be extra cautious about mandating that they get there. And that's where I have a little discomfort with this bill. There's some other minor tweaks that I'd like to see, and I've talked to the sponsors about them, and we will. I mean, I think that we can trust our parents. We do trust our parents, but they need to be given the information about these self-determined ratios with some of the facilities. So I just feel like this bill is in its infancy. It needs to be kept within sight and hearing, and I'm going to be a red light for right now.
Further debate on the bill. Too late for 33. Close the debate.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And friends, I'll just hit on a couple things. And that is, first, Idaho is one of 4 states. One of 4. That means 46 other states only regulate through the state. We're one of 4 that allows cities to overregulate. What does overregulate mean? It means that if you're a daycare provider in the city of Boise, and they came to tell us this, you have to regulate their time. You have to literally keep track how much of their time they spend looking at the TV. Not that I'm for watching TV, but I mean, you have to track that. I don't know, that just seems, I guess if you're a big daycare, you can do that. If you're mom and pop, it's kind of hard. And are we suggesting, because of regulations, that the city of Boise, and I say that because we're right here in the city of Boise, that the city of Boise is safer than the city of Meridian, who doesn't have city regulations? Because I think that's what we're suggesting, that the city of Boise must be safer because they have the most regulations, but they're not. It's a misdirection. It's a red herring on that. Kids have to be watched, and as we told you already in this bill, we have that language added talking about active supervision. There are ratios. You have to define them, and that really hits on the larger. But on the first 2, the family home center, and as just a reminder, the family home and the group center, they're capped. 6 or less, 12 to 7. It's capped, and all these other regulations are still there. You still have to be licensed. You still have to have that background check, folks. Thanks for those of you who stood up. This is common sense. We are in a child care crisis. The only options that these associations have thrown at us is we need more money. We need more money. We need more money. That's not going to solve the problem because everybody wants more money. Let's try deregulation and see what happens. It's worked with everything else we've done. I would appreciate that green vote. Thank you guys for enduring this particular daycare legislation our whole hour here.
Debate's closed. Question to House Bill 243 pass the House. Clerk will mark the sheet. Members cast their votes. President Galaviz. Clerk will lock. City members change their vote. Clerk will lock machine, record the roll, and report the pairs.
Green 12 votes aye, Green votes nay. Palmer votes aye, Mathias votes nay.
54 ayes, 15 nays, 1 absent and excused. Majority having voted in favor of House Bill 243. House Bill 243 is passed. House correct.